Okay, I was recently asked about some of the things, the most important things that people can do for themselves at home. Now, it's kind of a loaded question because it really depends on what your condition is and your symptoms are. But I think stretching is probably at the very top of my list. People say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. I think a stretch a day keeps the chiropractor away. Stretching is enormously important in keeping your joints lubricated. Uh, Another thing, obviously, is exercise. Exercise builds muscle mass. Muscle is basically a powerhouse and a factory, and it's a fat burning factory as well. So the more muscle you have, the more fat you're going to burn, and the healthier you will be. From a holistic point, also from a holistic point of view, nutrition, diet, obviously very, very important. Sleeping is enormously important. A lot of people really are not getting the proper amount of sleep, or they have a disorder called sleep apnea. A lot of people walking around with sleep apnea who don't even know it, myself included. Recently just got tested for that, and now I'm sleeping much better with a machine that they've given me. Um, Trying to think off the top of my head.
What's the most what's the most case you see the most? Like what's the biggest case?
Well, in my practice, the most cases that I see mostly post-traumatic cases because that's what I specialize in. I specialize in someone who's injured themselves either in a fall or some sort of accident, be it a car accident or an injury at work, an injury on the sports field, something like that. Someone twisted an arm or a repetitive use injury, people using the keyboard too much. So carpal tunnel syndrome is a big one. Obviously low back pain, neck pain, numbness and tingling from the fingers and toes. A lot of people don't realize that this can frequently be a result of a pinched nerve in the neck or a pinched nerve in the low back. Chiropractic treatment is very effective in treating those disorders. Um, Headaches. Um, a lot of headaches are really tension headaches, and they originate in the neck and the result of muscle spasm or some sort of joint dysfunction in the neck. And so chiropractic treatment is very, very effective for headaches as well.
At what speed does the whiplash take effects in?
What speed, you mean in a car collision, what
In a
speed
car
does the
crash?
car have to go?
Yes.
Well, believe it or not, there doesn't have to be a whole lot of velocity or speed involved. It's because the elements and components involved in a car crash are massive. So I don't want to bore you with science, but in physics there's a formula that's F equals ma, and that is force is equal to the mass times the acceleration. So the force of an injury to the neck is really not associated with how fast something hits it. It's really associated with the mass of that thing, and that thing is a car, and that's very massive. So it really has much more to do with the mass and the acceleration, but that's another argument, but as opposed to the velocity.
Now, when you put, let's say, a regular car plus a race car and they hit a crash, from the different points of seating, how does the wood splash affect each person? Let's say they put the same person in one car, how will it affect the person on the speed?
You mean because the race car is going faster?
Yeah, faster. Like how will it affect? Like if the race car crashes in the same spot at the same speed
So two cars going here. Oh, they're at the same speed too.
and they hit.
Okay. So who's going to be safer? The race car, the person
Yeah,
in the race car.
when they hit the collision, who's gonna get the most whoop splash?
Well, if you have a race car and say a Mercedes, and they're both traveling and they both hit a brick wall and they're going the same speed, actually the person in the Mercedes is much more likely to experience more damage for several reasons. First of all, a race car is really designed uh, for a crash much more than a typical uh, layman's car would be, for lack of a better term. Also, there's race car drivers wearing a helmet. Race car helmet will usually have some strap attached to it to actually keep the driver from going into whiplash. I think that was developed after the Dale Earnhardt injury. So to answer your question, you're actually safer in a race car if you're talking about the same speed. But if you're talking about different velocities, even though I said earlier velocity is not as important as mass, it does play some role because the acceleration or the deceleration of the neck involved in the injury is going to be different depending on the initial velocity.
Now, many people say, like, let's say that you broke your arm when you were like 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Some people say that that could still affect you as you grow up still. Is that true, or is that...
Well, it is true, and there's a lot of argument as to whether or not cracking your knuckles leads to arthritis. A lot of people consider that a myth or an old wives' tale. An old injury, can that still affect you? It depends on the injury. Now, believe it or not, an injury right in the middle of a long bone that is healed properly is probably never going to bother someone again. But it's the injuries that are towards the joint that may have affected the growth plate of the joint or may affect where the muscles attach to the bone. They can plague you for a long time, if not for the rest of your life, depending on really the extent of the damage to that area of the bone. So it's sort of an answer that you have to answer yes and no. It's possible for it to plague you for the rest of your life and affect you for the rest of your life. It's also possible that it may not, but it depends on certain circumstances.
Now, when you started your chiropractic, was it difficult for you, or was it easy for you to start like a new path in your life?
Oh, it was very difficult. I mean, I started from scratch. I didn't really know anyone in Allentown. I knew I wanted to practice in this particular region because, as I had mentioned earlier, the scope of practice was more desirable than it is in New Jersey, where I live, at least in my opinion. But I didn't know very many people at all. I rented a building, rented a space, put some advertisements out, and just saw patients one by one. Tried to do my best, and they thankfully appreciated and liked my services, and refer other patients. And I've been here ever since and growing, and been very, very pleased to serve the community in Allentown and Lehigh Valley.
So for one more last question, do you feel proud of where you are right now, or do you feel like you have completed or you have more to get?
Well, I have much more to do. I have much more to do because I think the more involved with practice I get, the more people there are out there to help. And so your shift and your focus becomes less and less on building your business, and it becomes more and more focused on the people that you're helping, the people that you're trying to serve. So I don't think you ever really are done with serving people.